You just finished editing your video. You went crazy on the visual effects. Your artist loves to draft and you're excited to put it out. Then comes the worst part. Color grade. You feel like any adjustment that you make doesn't look right and it just plummets your motivation. I'm him, that was me. So I spent years learning and figuring out how to properly color and get the look that I'm looking for. And I'm going to show you step by step how I make my videos look cinematic all the way to the end of color grading. So the very first thing comes down to is as you're shooting, your camera and your settings. Depending on the camera you have, you're going to want to shoot in log or raw. I personally shoot in log on my Blackmagic. It has come out perfectly. It's such a good DSLR. I love it. So make sure if you can, you're shooting in log. It will shoot everything in flat, desaturated colors so that in the end, you have a lot more room to play with color and it comes out much better in the end. So let's hop in Premiere real quick. Here, I just have a quick shot. I shot in log during a video shoot that we had. This is just some B-roll. So I'll throw it into the timeline. Boom. Put it in regular time because I shot it in slow motion. So the first thing is check out these Lumetri scopes. If you don't have it, go to window up here and make sure you have Lumetri scopes checked so you can have it in a panel somewhere because this is going to be your best friend. You're going to be watching this a lot. So in these Lumetri scopes, the higher, the more white. And the lower, the more black. First things first, let's get an adjustment layer to put it on top so we're not putting the effect right on our footage. And then we go to Effects, Lumetri Color, and put it on the adjustment layer. Now we have our Lumetri Color plugin on top of our footage. If I pull the whites up, you see that the top is going up. And if it touches the top, you don't want that because that means it's going to be clipping like here. You can see the sun on the tree. You're losing detail in the tree because of how bright we've made the sun. And same with the blacks. As you bring it down, you can see the bottom of everything going down. So the first things first is the white balance. When you're shooting on your camera, you're going to want to make sure your white balance is adjusted for the sun or the temperature of the lights that you're using. There's a whole range. I'll put up a picture right here so you can see. Make sure you get the Kelvin that you're shooting in as close as possible to your lighting condition while you're shooting. And then in here, it'll be easier to adjust. So the first thing you really want to do when you color grade is adjust the temperature and tint, which is your white balance. So in Premiere, in Lumetri Color, you have this eyedropper, which is easy to white balance adjust. You grab that, and he has a white fabric hanging off his pants. Easy to just select that. And so now the camera knows that that is white. So it just automatically adjusted your white balance for you. But without that, you can just adjust the temperature. You make it warmer to the temp or lower, make it cooler. And the tint is a little bit trickier. Make it greener or more magenta. I don't touch tint as much, but sometimes you do need a fine adjustment there. So to see it in the scopes, you're gonna wanna see that we have a little bit of red peeking out of the top. So that means it's a little bit warmer than it is neutral. So we're gonna wanna cool it down just a tad bit. But you see if we go too far, you get some blue popping up on top and you don't want that. So that means it's too cool for the whites. So you're gonna wanna adjust it just a little bit so that it's white. It's not gonna be perfect, but you can get as close as possible. And so we can use the tint to see if we can get it closer to white more than it is, but it looks like just the finest adjustment because if you go too far, you get some purple, and if you go too far the other way, you get some green, and we don't want that at all. So this looks about right. Contrast is the best part to making your footage cinematic. You're gonna wanna crush those blacks and bring up those whites. Especially if you're shooting in log, you're gonna wanna bring that contrast back. So we grab the blacks, we bring it down as far until you see how you can see that's kind of touching the bottom here. We don't want that at all. So we bring it back up just around there and give it some space. Same with the whites. We bring it back up. Before it touches any of the top, we bring it back down, just give it some space, just a little adjustment, nothing crazy. And now we can go into shadows and highlights. So shadows it's not the lowest of blacks, but it's below the midtones. And then highlights are not the highest of whites, but they're above the midtones. So shadows are more centered black, highlights are more centered whites. So for the shadows, you're gonna wanna bring them down to crunch the shadows a bit and get it stacked down there a little bit to make it darker. The highlights you're gonna wanna bring up to brighten it up a little bit at the same time. And so now we just added contrast. If I turn it on and off, you can see that there's a lot more contrast to this clip now. And you have exposure and contrast depending on your clip. You can add even more contrast through this slider here, but we also have more adjustments to go, so you don't really want to do that right now. And exposure, if for some reason you shot too low or too high, you can adjust it a bit for what you want. So now we have some contrast involved. We go down to creative, and here we have sharpen, which I always turn up a little bit just to get a little bit sharper. That's up to you and your liking. Faded film, if you're going for the old look, you can pull this up. This really just brings your blacks up, so you'll lose values in your blacks. And then we have vibrance and saturation, which you can turn up each, but keep an eye on your scopes to make sure nothing gets too high to where it will start losing detail and looking ugly. And then depending on the color grade you want, these shadow tints and highlight tints are going to be very useful. So we're in the forest right now. It's almost golden hour. You can see that the sun is shining through the trees a little bit low. So we would get the highlights a little bit of an orangish look, kind of almost golden looking. And bring the shadows into the whites or the blues a bit, just to give it that, almost dusk feel. And now you see how we have the reds. The reds are popping up a little bit, so we might want to go back and adjust the temperature again, just a little bit. We do want the reds a bit on top since we are trying to make it a little bit warm. And then the curves, you can open up the curves. The S curve is going to be your best friend. The S curve is just adding more contrast. So we take this point here, bring it down a bit. We take this point here and bring it up a bit. So that adds a lot of contrast. We can turn it on and off, but we can just make it a little bit more subtle in the end. So it's nothing too crazy. I want it a little bit darker. There we go. I like a lot of nice contrast if you're working. So my current process is not to use the vibrance, saturation, shadow, or highlight tint at all. So I usually turn them off and I just add the contrast myself with a little bit of wiggle room. And then here is where I add a LUT. There are LUTs all over the place that you can find to use that you like. I personally have this one that I custom made that I go to every time with all my favorite looks and everything. So let's choose one. I think autumn might look good. It might be a bit too much. Backroads looks good. Okay, so the fields looks cool. It's giving that warm golden hour look almost. But of course it's way too contrasted. So use the intensity to bring it down a bit. So that's just to add the color really. You add a little bit of it. And you can even bring back some of the contrast that you made. So you can bring more of the color in. Boom. Although you're going to want to bring some of the blacks down in this. Not the blacks, actually the shadows. You're going to want to bring the shadows down. Because you want it dark. And then before you call it done, you're going to want to add grain. It adds so much character to your video and makes it look, especially if you're in the niche that I'm in, the underground kind of like grungy look, you're going to need grain 100%. So something you can do right in Premiere is add another adjustment layer on top. You can use the noise effect, put it on top, and pump it to like maybe 8. 12 if you want a really intense look. And there you go. There's some easy grain for you right there. Not gonna lie, I have a better solution for you. I made these custom grain overlays that are easy easy as hell to use and very unique. There's different colors and textures in every single one of them. So I love using the grain soft effect, the grain soft one. Don't mind that, that's just my computer bugging out. This one is super clean to use. Drag it right on top of your footage and your color adjustment layer. And now these are all 4K overlay files. So you're gonna wanna scale them down. And then you're gonna wanna change the opacity to overlay. And boom, you have super realistic, clean grain look that you can just duplicate and put over top, just like that. Super clean and easy. And if you want something more intense or a different look, there are so many different looks like Tragedy. It's got that greenish, purplish, like TV look. You can put that right on top. Same thing, of course, bring it down since we're using 1080p footage and put it to overlay. And so you're getting that old kind of like dirty look. Or if you just want to go ham, super intense, like this here I use for some really really hard like underground music. Boom, super grainy and gross, just like how you might want it. Easy, just like that, easy as hell. 10 unique grain overlays. And of course, if you want to change it, all you gotta do is hold Alt, drag, and put it right on top. And now you have the soft one back on. No bias or anything, but I love these. They're easy to use. They're 10 unique grain overlays, and they come with 26 LUT files that you can just drag and drop and make your own unique looks. It's some of my best work. If you're interested in that, link in the description. But a little extra color grading tip. Let's get into coloring black and white footage. So I have this clip here. Now black and white is very useful depending on the kind of shot you're going for. And it's way easier to do. It's much easier to do because you only have grayscale. You're not working with all the colors. But I'm just gonna walk you through how I typically do black and white. So put an adjustment layer on top. And then before we do the lumetri color effect, we're gonna do a tint effect. And boom, that makes it black and white in itself. And then we add lumetri color. And then we add curves. Boom. And now this is really all we need. Remember the S curve I mentioned before? You're gonna wanna use it again to add your contrast. So you're gonna see a lot. So with curves, this point down here is pure black. This point is pure white. So with this shot, it's a little bit darker than normal, you can see. So we're gonna wanna bring the whites up a bit here and the blacks down. The whites up maybe more. There we go. And so this half down here is your shadows. This half up here is your highlights. So you're gonna wanna grab your shadows and a point. So you're gonna wanna grab a point in your bottom half and bring it down to give it more shadow, and a point in your top half to give it more highlights. I like dark, I like contrasty, dark. So I'm just gonna adjust a bit. Boom. Now look, if we can turn this on and off, you can already see how much that's doing. So coloring in black and white, your S curve is gonna be the thing you're gonna wanna play with the most. Now, of course, if you want to stylize, you can play with the color curves as well to get maybe more of like a moody blue black and white look, or just like an old-timey, like nasty look, like an old-time yellowish look. But so now the midtones, you're gonna want, I kind of want some of that shadow detail coming back in right where his hair and arm kind of gives a shadow. Right about there. So that kind of brings in more of a shadow. So it's not just whitewashing his face, it kind of gives that shadow back in the side of his head and his hairline. Just like that. Now, if you're choosing to go black and white with your footage, you definitely want grain. Now, this shot is super dark and menacing. So I think this intensely dark grain is gonna look sick. So let's try this out. Put an overlay. Look at that. Ooh, super grunge. Look at that. That's sick. Ooh. I wish I did that for the final video, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, that's how I color grade. That's the strategy I usually go through. The LUTs and grain pack will be down below. It's such a good pack. I recommend everybody use it. Let me know down below what you think, if you have any suggestions. If you made it this far in the video, I have a code for you for 20% off our LUTs and Grains pack that I used in this video. It's right here on screen, blinking probably. I'm gonna make it blink for you. If you use this code, the first link down below, you'll get 20% off. I think any pack that we have, but the LUTs and Grains pack is on there, and I definitely recommend you check it out. If not, no worries, but definitely use this process if you're feeling overwhelmed about color grading, because it helped me a lot.